On a Thursday morning in September of 1891, Elias Granger was given two choices by a territorial judge: 3 years in the Santa Fe jail, or marry a woman he'd never met and help keep alive an orchard somebody was killing one Watergate at a time. He took the marriage to stay out of prison. He stayed because by the second week, he realized the men stealing Naomi Bell's water were the same men planning to steal her land. Nobody in San Tomas expected Elias Granger to reach 35. Not the men he had freighted with, not the deputy who tried to drag him out of Calder's feed shed, and certainly not Judge Lucian Orr, who sat behind a scarred pine desk and told Elias his luck had narrowed to exactly 2 roads. You broke into a freight shed. You took shelter without permission. And when Deputy Sloan laid hands on you, you put him on the floor. He grabbed me first, Elias said. Judge Orr looked at him over the edge of his papers. He had the tired face of a man who had watched too many hard lives come through the same door wearing different boots. 3 years, he said. Maybe more if Sloan wants to nurse his pride. Then he gave Elias the other road. Amos Bell, owner of a struggling orchard east of town, was too sick to hold his land together. His daughter was unmarried. The harvest was failing. And Amos had offered a bargain. Drop the charges, deed Elias a small strip of land and wages besides if he married Naomi Bell and stayed. Elias turned to the window. Outside, the street was dry and pale. A dog slept under a wagon. A woman in a brown work dress crossed the road with a ledger tucked under one arm, moving like someone whose day was already too full. He did not know it then, but that was Naomi. She agree to this? Elias asked. Judge Orr took a breath. She knows, and she did not refuse. Elias understood that kind of answer. There is a distance between agreeing and not refusing. He had lived most of his life inside that distance, so he took the deal. The wedding happened 4 days later in a small adobe chapel with no flowers, no music, and no one pretending this was a celebration. Amos Bell stood to one side with a cane he had not needed the year before. He looked like a man swallowing bitter medicine and insisting it would keep him alive. Naomi Bell stood beside Elias and stared straight ahead. She was not soft. She was not apologetic. She looked rooted, like if the whole chapel blew sideways in a storm, she would still be the one thing left standing. She did not look at him once while the preacher read the vows. Oddly, Elias respected her for that. Outside, after the ceremony, she finally turned to him. Her eyes were the color of river water after rain. No warmth, no hatred, just clear assessment. I need to say this before we go out there, she said. I did not ask for this. Neither did I. Good, she said. Then we understand each other. You work the orchard. You stay out of my way. I stay out of yours. When my father is strong again, we decide what comes next. You always talk like you're closing an account book. Something almost moved behind her eyes. I talk like a woman who learned a long time ago that hoping out loud is expensive. Then she walked to the wagon, and Elias followed. The Bell place sat 5 miles east of San Tomas, where the valley floor lifted into dry red terraces and a stone-lined acequia cut silver through the dust. It was 18 acres of peaches, apricots, and late apples, with a low adobe house, a packing shed, 2 settling ponds, and rows of trees that had once been loved well enough to make the whole place feel held together. Now it was fraying, not from neglect, from pressure. Too few hands, too much ground, too little water arriving when it was supposed to. Amos climbed down from the wagon slowly. He was still broad through the shoulders, still looked like a man who had been hard to beat in his prime, but illness had gotten into him the way drought gets into land. "You know orchard work?" he asked. "Enough to keep trees alive." "Ditch work?" "Yes." Amos looked toward the eastern terraces. "We've been losing water," he said. "Not to drought, not to the season, to somebody's hands." Naomi had already gone inside. Through the kitchen window, Elias could see her setting down jars, lighting the stove, pulling her sleeves back, doing the quiet work that keeps a place standing whether anyone thanks you or not. "How long?" Elias asked. "Almost 4 months," Amos said. "Started small, an hour missing from the east run, then 3, then a whole night gone. Last month we lost 12 young peach trees on the upper rows." "Who handles water claims?" "Nolan Price." Amos said the name carefully. "County water recorder, deputy seal besides. Supposed to inspect diversions, confirm markers, settle disputes." "He came out," Amos said. "Walked the ditch, wrote in his little book, said he'd look into it." "And?" "That was 6 weeks ago." Elias looked at the terraces again. He had seen this pattern before, a thing taken slowly enough that each loss could be explained away. A missing hour, a moved stone, a frightened hired hand. Then suddenly, paper arrived to tell you what was left of your own land did not belong to you anymore. That night, lying awake in the bunk room with the wind brushing the cottonwoods, Elias stared at the ceiling and thought about Naomi in the chapel, standing there like she had driven roots through the floor. He thought about missing water. He thought about the kind of men who prefer theft that arrives as paperwork. And for the first time in a long while, he was not lying awake because he planned to leave at dawn. The first week passed quietly. Elias did not wait to be told what needed doing. He saw it. A sluice gate warped off true, a broken hinge on the packing shed, a silted branch ditch that was starving 3 rows of late peaches, a windbreak fence leaning enough to fail under the first winter storm. He fixed things in order, without asking for praise, without announcing each repair. Naomi watched the way people watch weather, from a distance, carefully, without admitting it. She had her own rhythm. Up before light, coffee on, accounts open on the kitchen table by dusk, medicine measured for her father, fruits sorted, supplies counted, numbers crossed out and rebalanced with the tired precision of someone who had been making too little stretch too far for too long. She did not cook for Elias. She cooked for the household. He was simply in it now. He noticed she never sat during the conversations about water. She stayed near the stove, or the counter, or the doorway. Present, but never centered. Amos talked more than she did. On the 4th morning, he came out to where Elias was clearing a blocked turnout and stood with both hands on his cane. "Price has been working at this place for nearly 2 years, Amos said. "Not all at once. The ditch first, then the workers." Elias kept shoveling mud clear. "We had 2 men last spring," Amos went on. "Good men. Price told them there were questions about title. Told them anyone working here might be dragged into a dispute. They left inside a week." "Who's behind him?" "Calvin Rusk. Bought land north of the Wash 3 years ago. Has money. Wants our east branch. Without it, his parcel is just dust and mesquite." Elias leaned on the shovel. "You still have the original water grant?" Amos gave him a hard look. "Filed in 79. Copied twice. Survey map and ditch measurements both. Locked in the front room." "Then the paper exists," Elias said. Amos's mouth tightened. "Paper only holds," he said, "if the man reading it is honest." That stayed with Elias. So did the fact that Naomi heard every word and never interrupted once. He rode the full ditch line that Saturday before the sun climbed high. Slowly, reading the ground. The upper diversion gate was where it should be. The western split looked untouched. But at the far eastern line, where the Bell ditch narrowed toward the young orchard rows, he found it. A marker stone had been shifted. Not far. 36 feet, maybe. But 36 feet in the right direction could starve an entire terrace and later be written down as if that line had always been true. The ground around the stone was wrong, too recently disturbed, too carefully patted back. There were boot marks in the dry sand under a creosote bush. 2 men, maybe 3, all recent. Nearby, the iron pin that fixed the gateboard into place showed fresh scrape marks. He stared north and saw a roofline in the distance. Rusk's pump house. When he rode back, Naomi was in the packing shed checking late apricots for bruise rot. The east marker was moved, he said. She went still. Not surprised, just confirmed. How far? Far enough. She set down the fruit in her hand. Father suspected it. I can set it back. Price will notice. Yes. And when he notices, he will come. Yes. Naomi held his gaze. For the first time, she looked at him as if she was measuring not what he could do, but whether he meant to do it. You understand what standing there costs? She asked. Elias answered honestly. I already found it. Standing in front of it is just the next step. She looked down at the table, then back at him. Reset it, she said. I'll tell my father tonight. He went before dawn the next morning with the Bell survey copy, a mallet, and his own notes. He set the marker back exactly where the 79 Grant placed it, measured twice, drove it deep, tamped the ground hard, then sketched the location in a notebook he kept folded in his coat. 4 days later, Nolan Price rode in. He came on a good bay horse with a brushed coat, a neat hat, and a deputy seal on his vest placed just carefully enough to make sure everyone saw it. He was younger than Elias expected, lean, pale-eyed, pleasant in the way a knife can look pleasant if all you notice is the shine. Didn't know the Bells had taken on a husband, Price said. More than that, Elias said. I'm family. Price's eyes recalculated. That's so. Quick arrangement. Fast or slow, it's done. Price smiled without warmth. There are questions about the Eastern Branch, he said. I thought I'd ride it with Amos Bell, make sure the records reflect the truth. I'll save you the ride, Elias said. I already checked it. Markers are exactly where the 79 Grant puts them. All of them. Price was quiet for a beat too long. Then he said, Good to know someone's keeping an eye on things. Someone is, Elias said. Price turned his horse toward the gate. Just before leaving, he looked back. Congratulations on the marriage, he said. I hope it lasts. Naomi had heard the whole exchange from the porch. He'll come back, she said after the dust settled. I know. With more than words next time. I know that too. Something changed in the way she looked at him then. Not welcome, not yet, but recognition. That night the ditch was hit. Elias woke just after midnight to a sound too purposeful to be weather. Not wind. Wood striking stone. Water forced where it should not go. He was out the bunkroom door in under a minute, boots half-laced, rifle in one hand, lantern dark in the other. He moved along the acequia low and fast, following the sound upstream. There were 6 men at the diversion, 2 at the gateboard, 2 with shovels, 2 farther out, ready to drive the redirected flow north toward Rusk's Cut. They were not panicked. They were practiced. That told Elias everything. He fired once into the dark above them. The shot cracked the valley wide open. The men scattered, not wild, not confused, fast and disciplined, the way hired men move when they already know where they are supposed to run. Elias reached the gate as the first surge of water slammed past the wrong side of the split. He dropped the board back into place, jammed the iron pin through with both hands, and felt the force of the flow hammer the wood. By the time Amos reached him with a lantern, and Naomi behind him in her father's old coat, the worst of it was over. But not all of it. Enough water had been turned to leave the upper terrace roots dry for the rest of the night. By noon, 7 young peach trees had curled gray at the leaves. 3 would not recover. Naomi stood in the row beside them, one hand on the trunk of the smallest tree, saying nothing. Silence looks different on different people. On Amos, it looked like anger gone old. On Elias, it looked like calculation. On Naomi, that morning, it looked like grief with no time allowed for grief. Back in the kitchen, Elias laid out exactly what happened. 6 men. The east split. The same section Price wanted reviewed. No guesswork. No decoration. Amos listened with both hands flat on the table. "He wants us gone," the old man said. "He wants the water," Elias said. "Driving you off is just the method." Naomi poured coffee, then did something she had not done once since Elias came to the ranch. She sat down at the table with them. Not near it. At it. "We go above Price," she said. "With the grant copy, your notes, the rate account, and the missing flow records. We go to the Territorial Irrigation Office." Amos looked at her. "Price has friends in the county seat." "Then we do not stop there." She turned to Elias. "We have evidence now. What we've been missing is someone willing to carry it." He looked at her across the table. All his life, he had been the kind of man who kept one foot loose, ready to move, ready not to belong, ready to leave before leaving could hurt. And he found, sitting there in that warm kitchen with dirt still dried on his hands and 7 young trees already starting to die outside, that he did not want to be that man this time. "I'll ride at first light," he said. Naomi nodded once. That was all. But it was enough. The ride to Santa Fe took him 2 days. He arrived dust-covered, stiff-backed, and carrying more Bell paperwork than anyone looking at him would have expected. The Territorial Irrigation Office smelled like lamp oil, ink, and old paper. He asked for the senior registrar and was told to wait. The woman who finally called him in was named Miriam Alden. City coat, sharp eyes, no patience for wasted words. She read the 79 grant. Then she read his notes. Then she read the missing flow dates Naomi had kept in columns so neat they looked almost severe. "Nolan Price," she said at last. "I know the name." "Fondly?" "Not remotely." She asked precise questions. How often the water vanished, whether marker movement matched the flow loss, who benefited north of the line, whether Elias had seen men at the diversion himself. "Yes," he said, "and I'd know the pattern again." She leaned back. "I can send an investigator," she said. 4 to 6 weeks, maybe sooner if another file breaks loose. "Can Price act before that?" "He can try," she said, "which is why you're filing this today. Once it's in the record, any move he makes lands inside an active review." That was not safety, but it was something. When Elias returned, Naomi was at the stove, and Amos was asleep in the front room chair. "The office took it," Elias said. "Official review. Investigator coming. Miriam Alden knows Price by name, and not kindly." Naomi set down the spoon in her hand. "How long?" 4 to 6 weeks. She looked disappointed for only a second, then practical again. "That's enough for him to try something before they arrive." "It is." She studied him for a moment. "Thank you," she said. It caught him off guard. It needed doing. A great many things need doing, she said quietly. Not everyone does them. Something in the kitchen shifted after that. Nothing dramatic, no sudden tenderness, no easy words, just warmth. The kind that arrives when two people stop bracing quite so hard against each other. Price came back 3 weeks later with 2 riders behind him and a folded paper in his coat. He read from it on the porch in a voice so even it was almost insulting. A revised channel survey, he called it, an emergency allocation adjustment. According to this new filing, the eastern branch of the Bell Ditch had always been outside the original grant line, which meant the water beyond that point now belonged to Calvin Rusk's parcel. Amos stood in the doorway. Naomi stood beside him. Elias stood on the porch step below them. The territorial office has the original grant, the field notes, and a formal complaint already under review, Elias said. Price's pale eyes flicked once. Does it? It does. Investigator is coming. He'll want to see that paper, and the names attached to it. The 2 riders behind Price exchanged a glance. Price folded the document slowly, carefully, as if neat hands could still impose order on a bad position. He looked at Amos, then Naomi, then Elias, and for the first time, Elias saw the number change behind his eyes. This was no longer a quiet taking. This was risk. Price tipped his hat. Then I suppose we all wait for the investigator. He rode away. Naomi watched until he was gone. Then she said, Come in. Supper's ready. It was the plainest sentence in the world, and it stayed with Elias all night. The investigator arrived 29 days later. His name was Edwin Mercer, a quiet man in a dust-dark coat with a leather satchel, a measuring chain, and the careful voice of somebody who had spent years untangling lies other men thought were neatly tied. He stayed 2 days. He walked every line, checked every marker, measured the grade on the eastern branch, compared Price's new survey to the 79 grant and Naomi's flow records and Elias's field notes. He spoke to Amos alone, then Elias. When he left, he said almost nothing, which somehow made them trust him more. The letter came 6 weeks later, then a second one the same day. The first confirmed the original Bell water grant in full. Boundary, ditch course, and diversion rights exactly as filed in 1879. The second informed Amos Bell that Nolan Price had been suspended from county authority pending a wider investigation into manipulated water records across 4 separate properties. Amos read both letters twice. Then he set them down, covered his eyes with one hand, and sat very still. Naomi put her hand on his shoulder. Elias looked out the window because some moments are too private to watch directly, even when you helped carry them there. The last distance between him and Naomi did not break in a grand way. It broke in the orchard on an October evening, with the first clean cold of the season coming down off the mesas. They were lifting the last crates from the late row, working side by side in the fading light. For a while they said nothing. They had gotten good at each other's quiet. Then Naomi spoke. I used to think being alone meant I had failed somehow. Elias kept working. He had learned by then that she did not open doors just to hear them slam shut. I told myself I was particular, she said, that the life I had was enough, that peace and loneliness were close enough to the same thing. She looked up at him. I don't think peace was the word after all. What was? Resignation. The light was low now. The trees were darkening at the edges, and Elias Granger, who had spent 35 years making sure he never stayed anywhere long enough to be claimed by it, set down the crate in his hands and finally said the thing that had been making its way toward him for weeks. I'm not here because of the judge anymore, he said. I'm not here because Amos needed a hand, or because I had nowhere else to go. I'm here because somewhere between that moved marker and the night they tried to turn your water, this stopped feeling like a place I was passing through. And if you'll have me, I would like this to be a real marriage, not the one they arranged, the one we choose." Naomi stood very still. Then she stepped closer. The wind moved once through the trees, soft, dry, almost warm for that late in the year. "When we married," she said, "every answer in my life had been given for me by someone else. My father, the judge, the situation itself." She held his eyes. "If I say yes now, it will be because I am saying it, not because I failed to refuse. That's the only yes I want." Something in her face changed then, not into softness exactly, into relief, into the expression of someone who has been carrying weight so long she no longer remembers what it felt like to set it down. "All right," she said. Simple as that. But all the way down, she meant it. So did he. The Bell orchard held through winter. The dead saplings were replaced in spring. The branch ran where it had always belonged. Amos got stronger by degrees, not quickly, but enough. And the people in San Tomas, who had watched that strange little marriage with the appetite small towns have for other people's bad odds, eventually stopped talking about the bargain that brought Elias Granger there. They talked instead about the season Nolan Price lost his seal, about the woman who kept the records, the old man who kept the grant, and the husband who had been meant as a stopgap and turned out, in the end, to be the first man who stayed. He took the marriage to avoid a cell. He kept it because a person can spend a lifetime mistaking survival for freedom. Until one day, standing in fading light with dust on his boots and the right hand in his, he realizes the place he fought for is also the place he finally wants to belong.